We're live.
We're live. We are here for what is usually the office hours that we hold on Wednesdays. But we decided to do on Thursday. Mostly it's my fault, folks. Mostly it's my fault. But my name is Laddick. I'm coming to you from Open LMS with my dear, dear friend and colleague, Christian Duque. How are you, sir?
Great. Good afternoon, everyone.
Is it coffee time? I guess so. 5 o'clock. Do you have cafecitas in
It's always coffee time, isn't it?
I guess in De Colombia, it's always coffee time.
That's right. Colombian coffee.
Super nice. So we had, we kind of got deep last week, where we talked about the first session of the design session of the eLearn Success series. We talked about what success really looks like, what engagement looks like, those kinds of things. What do we have on the docket today to talk about? Meta. That was the teaser title. Meta, going meta.
Yeah. So for people who don't know, usually monthly, but it's not like we're not sticklers about it. We try to do a review of meta-analysis, like pieces of research from reputable journals. In fact, the process, we start like from the top in terms of, there is like a way to score all these journals. So we go from the top down. Usually it's like how often the papers from that journal are cited. And I'm not sure which other factors. And there's a lot of bibliometrology to that. So we go.
Bibliometrology, nice. I'm psyched.
And something I've mentioned before, we prefer meta-analysis for a couple of reasons. And in fact, doing this one, I found even more reasons to do it. But it's basically a way to, so these researchers, they don't do any additional research, but they look through all the research that's been done to get like a broader sense, a more robust sense, if that makes sense, of a certain topic of issue. And we decided to look into interactivity or related topics to interactivity. So I'm really looking forward to see your thoughts on the things that we found.
Hit me up. I'm ready. I'm excited.
Yeah. I have a little clip from the podcast. Should we do it before, later? How you feeling?
Would it fit better inside the conversation, or is it like a great tee up to the conversation?
I don't know. It's like a teaser of the podcast, so that's like another issue entirely.
We need to tease the podcast, ladies and gentlemen. If you aren't aware already, and you're listening to this, you may actually be listening to it on our podcast stream right now, actually. But if you're not aware, Chris and I have been running a podcast for several years now. We're creeping up on very close to our 100th episode. I think we're on episode 79 now. Is that right?
Yeah.
And our last episode is actually a replay of a live broadcast that we did with Estefania Fernandez. She's based in Berlin, and she is we call her an edupreneur. I think she's a pretty classic entrepreneur, but she's found a home in the education space, matching NGOs with interested students to perform social innovation projects and those kinds of things. So it's really, really interesting conversation. I love the innovation conversation quite a bit. But what the week before we had Ray, oh no, now I'm going to ruin his last name. Blankney. It's Blankney.
Yeah.
It's not Black though. It's actually he actually makes a great joke about his illiterate ancestors who wrote their name, but it's Blankney. And he's the founder of a company called Live Lingua, which is a very powerful and robust language learning online platform, online school, right? He employs hundreds, thousands of teachers in, I think, what was it, 11 or 12 different languages. And super interesting to hear his journey about how he did that. But let's hear what the podcast sounds like. I think I just told everything. So go ahead.
Yeah, but it's about Estefania, not
okay.
Ray.
Let's hear it.
Okay.
This is the eLearn Podcast, episode number 77.
I think there's a process that's somewhat archaic and outdated of connecting students to jobs through job boards or even internships for that matter. And it's tricky because in order for them to get jobs and to get internships, they need experience. And then where are they going to go to get that experience while they're doing school? And now we know, I think over 80% of students are working at the same time they're doing school. So it's really difficult to get them quality experience in different settings as they're working through school.
That was actually Jody McPherson and Leah. Whose last name?
And I totally blew it.
But you know what? They were the episode before that, and Jody and Leah are the founders of a company called Upskill. And they actually connect. They basically, they're a middleware company, right? I mean, it's not like Automated or anything like that, but they've identified this long, persistent gap in the higher education to corporate universe for adult learners. Where, you know, if you're coming out of university and you want to go work for a corporation, how do you get that first job? How do you get experience doing what you want to do, and those kinds of things? And I really love I love their approach, because it's one of the things we forget about in our e-learning universe, the human nature of things, right? And there are things that just require a human touch, and that's one of the best parts about that conversation that we had was their now discovery in the evolution of their business, in how important it is and how much just even a conversation with somebody can change their day, change their life, change, you know, their trajectory, which is really cool.
Yeah, and not to excuse my screw up, but those are very similar models, you know, like it's basically all about playing this middleman between university or academic experience and the corporate, the hands-on, the actual experience. And I have the Stefania clip here. They're very similar because they want to do that matching, you know, and something that I always thought is that at least when we talk about the term of intermediation, may get a bad rap sometimes, like especially from an economic standpoint. Like there's places where there are too many people in the middle, like in the value chain. They add very little, but I think it's time to make a difference or to share stories when intermediation actually plays a good role. And both Jody and Leah are a great example, and so is Stefania, which I have it right here.
This is the eLearn Podcast, episode number 79.
The point here is that they get motivated because they work on a real challenge. And that's the social commitment that we have. It's basically democratization of education also. So the training are for free for NGO partners. We partner with NGO. And they present a challenge, and that challenge is the one we use to learn.
Excellent. So there you have. There's Estefania.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Spanish transplant to Berlin, which, you know, I hear about Berlin more and more and more, and it's just, you know, I love the startup tech hub that it is. There's just such vibrancy there. Anyway, nice. All right, take us into Meta.
All right. So this actually on our Instagram already. So I decided to call it 3 Meta Analysis to rethink your interactions with learners/consumers. So this time we're actually using journals like from marketing, and we actually use like the top marketing journals that are out there. So the first meta-analysis is called...
Before you dive in, what is the Instagram people should follow?
Oh, LMS Pulse. You can see it.
Okay, and what about eLearn? Does eLearn also have one?
I thought it was us. No, well, there is an open LMS one, and it's really more focused on the product and so on.
Excellent. No, I want to make sure that we get that branding out there. So at LMS Pulse, I guess we're still in the process of melding, you know, getting the technology melded together since we joined OpenLMS. Jason Melton actually asked, can you share the link to this on your Instagram? So
yeah, of course.
Yes, we will put that, Jason, we will put that out into the comments. Thanks for your question.
Let me just put it there. So yeah, this is a 2020 meta-analysis of when and how advertising creativity works. And that's actually something that I've asked myself along for a while, and it's you often see like this would have been perfect for the Super Bowl because there's all these ads that are like so, I don't know, creative, quote unquote.
And well, but that's like, like I think a third of the people watch the Super Bowl, the American football Super Bowl, to for the ads, just for the ads, right? I know that's the reason my wife shows up.
Yeah, I used to be very very aware of that, and I would watch all the ads. Now I just watch like a couple. Like I get it. But what I've always wondered is, does creativity make for effective advertising or persuasion? So basically the question the researchers try to find is, does creativity actually work when it comes to behavior change? Which is something we were discussing last time on all the elements of behavior. So these are very, very long process, and we're doing a very abrupt summary, but basically, yes. I guess the conclusion with this meta-analysis is yes, but, or no, but, or yes, however, and so on.
I mean, has academia ever given like the clear black and white? Like, yes, that the answer is yes. I mean, maybe gravity, but there you go. All right.
So basically, the main takeaway is that there is one element called affect transfer, and I wouldn't. I mean, does it ring a bell to you in any way, that term affect transfer?
No, but my gut reaction to it would be, if you feel something about a particular topic, moving that emotion or that sentiment to another topic or something like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So yeah, I think that's exactly it. So it's a way for you to to feel something that you used to feel before, but onto something new.
It's one of it's one of those things where if you, I mean, I'm going to take a really crude or crass example, but if you think about the advertising for pharmaceuticals in the United States, right? One of the things that a pharmaceutical company advertisement will do is it will create a sentiment, right? It'll create that, hey, this is going to make me feel better, and I'm going to be outside walking and this and that, while at the same time, all of those bad things happen to you as well, right? Or all those bad things could possibly happen to you. But so it's like transferring, or it's like it's getting you to make, it's attaching a sentiment, it's attaching a feeling to it. And then you're saying like, will it change my behavior? So if I, was used to act one way, or I was, I made certain choices, my behavior acted a certain way. Is there a way that I can creatively get you to do something else by bringing that same emotion, that same feeling into that new creative activity? I'm probably butchering the example there, but that makes sense to me.
That would make two of us. But I agree with you. Like, I guess creativity in terms of understanding what someone is feeling about something and finding an out of the box way to take that and invite the audience into caring about this other thing. That's where creativity works best.
Okay.
The second item, which I think is pretty related, is familiarity.
Okay.
So I think it makes perfect sense. So if you want to persuade for an idea, especially we take into consideration the transfer, it means that you need to have some affect towards something, right? Before, in order for the advertising to take advantage of that familiarity.
Okay.
Although I do see a bit of a conflict. I mean, it means that when it's creative, you cannot be completely like from scratch. You cannot be creative from scratch. you need to use things that are there, that are familiar to people.
Sure. Okay. So let's take a couple of examples. I'm going to keep using your Super Bowl analysis, right?
Okay.
In the last Super Bowl, there's been quite a bit of controversy around, for other reasons, but around the creative advertisement by Coinbase. Did you see that one? Do you know what I'm talking about?
The little QR.
Yeah, they did a QR code and it just bounced around the screen and changed colors, right? So you didn't have any idea what the QR code was about or anything, but everyone now, especially because of the pandemic, are familiar with QR codes, right? You go to a restaurant, you got to do the QR code because you can't get a menu, blah, blah, blah. They're becoming more and more popular. But so they merged the creative with the familiar, right? A second one I'm thinking of is to use famous actors or something that we're all really familiar with in order to promote something new. And so there was I'm not going to mention the name of the alcohol product, but there was a cerveza product that used the movie The Big Lebowski and many actors from The Big Lebowski which is a very famous movie that lots of people are familiar with. It's called Classic. You can quote from it. They use that to introduce a new product, right? To introduce a new flavor. Or I can't remember if it's a new flavor or whatever. But they're trying to take that sentiment. You really, you love that movie, you love those actors, you like all those things, and you attach it to that brand. So there you go.
Well, that makes perfect sense. Makes me think that this plays just straight when it comes to nostalgia, those appeals to nostalgia, when you're trying to promote something that's new.
Okay, cool.
That's interesting. And another factor that I thought it would be worth mentioning is involvement. And involvement is related to how difficult is the process of making a decision or buying a product. So for the products that OpenLMS sells, for example, I think that's perfect because it's not that you go to a store or call someone and say, hey, give me one. No, we need to do a needs analysis. There's a bit of a negotiation going on, and we need to understand a lot of facts. So when there is involvement in the process, creativity plays a better role.
Okay.
Which sounds reasonable.
Sounds reasonable. Sure.
So that's the first.
Awesome. Take us to meta number 2. Level dose.
So this one is called Re-examining the Experiential Advantage in Consumption, a meta-analysis and review.
Okay.
From 2020. I know it sounds complicated, but I think there is a lot of conventional wisdom about this. Basically, the questions they set out to ask is, do we yield greater happiness from an experience than from a product?
Sure. Is it better? Are you happier buying experiences than you are buying things? It's great. I think that we see this meme all the time, right? This is the social scientific proof, eh?
Yeah, I was thinking about this, especially at these times, in those times of fake news and so on, you need to have a lot of evidence, even for the most obvious things.
Obvious things, sure.
Yeah, exactly. So it's good. Some people say, why did researchers waste their time doing this if it's so obvious, everybody knows? And there's a lot of research about that. Sometimes to an extreme level. Sure. But overall, I think it's good. It's good to have evidence even for the things, because that just
good to have evidence. It's also good to understand causality and those kinds of things. Like our good friend Tonya Riney in her presentation last November at our Innovation Summit. She just did such a killer job of putting up some of these great examples. She's like, how you create causality or how you determine it, right? Like she put up things like, 100% of people who drink water will die eventually, right? Like that's true. But like if you say it in a certain way, wow, that sounds like a really important fact, right? But there's no real tie-in to or importance to that data or importance to that statement because it's just true. So what is true about the data and what are you actually analyzing? But anyway, take us to experience versus stuff. I'm a huge fan of this, so I hope you don't kill it for me.
Well, so the question is, like, is there an experiential advantage, like especially over like a product in terms of how you invest your time, your money? And the answer is yes, of course. However, there are factors that make that experiential advantage heightened. So the first one is relatedness. So whenever, I guess that has several readings, but I guess the more straightforward one is whenever their experience has an element of relatedness, it's much better. So, and I guess you see it on ads all the time, especially, well, I'll go to there, but many products, especially high-end products, don't promote the product itself, but promote kind of a lifestyle.
Sure. Yeah. It's lifestyle marketing rather than,
yeah. So people, in a way, the clients are what's advertised, if that makes sense. And I mean, we do it all the time. We say, oh, our product is used by this top university, this top corporation. So by being a client of us, you are part of that club.
Oh, absolutely. 100%. If you it's not this watch that you're wearing that's important. It's the fact that you're wearing the watch will communicate a certain lifestyle or a certain choice, right? And you see that as well. It's not even necessarily about expensiveness. Are you casual? Are you hip? Are you funny? Are you innovative? Are you, what are the different, I mean, millions of dollars a year, millions and millions of dollars each year are spent on how do we attach our brand to certain adjectives or adverbs, right? 100%.
Absolutely. And I wondered about the implications on education. And well, I was interviewing this woman that teaches some metallurgy courses online.
You mean like the study of metal, like metallurgy?
Metallurgy, like sort of mining engineering.
Okay, yeah, okay, sorry, metallurgy, yeah, the study of mining engineering,
like extraction and processing. And I think there's not a lot of people who do that, let alone who study that. And this course is new because in the past it's all like generational knowledge transfer within companies. So I wondered, like, there is a way in which being a metallurgist must feel good in a very special way. Like, I am of a few people around the world who actually know how to get copper out of a stone.
Yeah, exactly. I know, first of all, I know how to smell it and find it, and then I know how to dig it out of the ground, and I know which chemical to use to extract it, and then how to put it back together, right? Yeah, I remember the first gold mine I ever visited in Uzbekistan. Many decades.
First
gold mine.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, one of my first assignments in that past life that people have heard about before. I went to a place called Zardofshan, Uzbekistan, which is the home of the largest open pit gold mine in the world. That means that they just dig a big hole in the ground, right? And they dig down.
Yeah.
And it's probably, that was 20 years ago, so it's probably much bigger now, but it was 3.5 kilometers wide. Like the diameter was 3.5 kilometers, this big hole in the ground. But the most fascinating thing about it was watching this gush of water come through the heap, the heap leaches, that's what they call them. And it comes out and it goes into this, secret room where it actually turns it back into gold. But like, you see this thing, it just looks like water, but the person who gave me the tour said, like, that's gold. That is literally liquid gold right there, even though it just looks like water, Wow. But obviously it's a solution of the gold element plus the cyanide that they use to leach it out of the rocks. So
yeah. Well,
thank you for listening to my TED Talk. Sorry.
No, but you make me think. Like, I think it's impossible to find relatedness to your life experience. Like, I mean, we can relate, we agree on a lot of things, but there is a point with relatedness, like perfect relatedness with everyone, especially storied people. It's kind of a myth.
I think that's also, yes. I don't know how to answer that. I'm not sure exactly how to respond to that, because I think this is where we also see I mean, we could go down a big rabbit hole here on, tribalism, essentially, right? Where, and I know that some people they hate that word tribe, even though it's a very adept word for the feelings that we feel. I mean, going back to our Super Bowl example, I mean, how many people are just ready to, not give their life, but like just do whatever it takes for their football team or their sports team, right? And you think about it in like the soccer universe, the football universe, right? Like there are literally people who they own every jersey, they own cleats, they'll go to every game. Like the emotions that run at some of the games are just absolutely incredible because it's their hometown, right? It's their team.
You're part of it.
Even though they probably can't even play soccer. So
yeah, no, and I don't know if you mentioned it because of the news that were happening in Mexico about the clashes between. I'm not. I don't have the details.
Soon we have the U.S. Mexico game that will be played for the World Cup qualifying here, and it's actually happening in 15 days here.
I see.
And one of the things I find very interesting. Go ahead. You tell me what the clashes are.
Yeah, but that was like in the local league, the local Mexico league. There was a lot of disturbance, and I guess there were a lot of injured people. And I know that that's happened before. That happens a lot. There's the hooligans in the UK, across Latin America. That tends to happen.
Well, like this game I'm describing now, like as someone who's a non-Mexican, I can only get one kind of ticket to the game, which is to go to the extraños, area.
Oh, because you don't belong to any.
Well, I mean, because they want to make sure that I don't get myself hurt. Quite honestly, right? Like, and it's not saying anything bad against Mexicans. It's just saying like people get so passionate, if the U.S. happens to do well in the game, passions run high. So
yeah, and I mean, going back to the relatedness and learning, there's a lot of pride in many people from knowing a lot of trivia about soccer and the history and like who was that player in the 60s, and that's really interesting.
So
but I guess
be aware of moderators here.
Moderators?
It says here on the slide, but we have to be aware of moderators and socioeconomic hedonism.
Yeah, like moderating factors that sort of filter the effect. But I was going to say, maybe to counter what you mentioned about tribalism in terms of the experiential advantage, there is autonomy stands out like as a factor. If you create an experience that helps to autonomy and meaningfulness, the better it is. And I guess that's another thing to be aware of when we're discussing science and this kind of research. And it's not, these aren't like they are proven. Doesn't mean they are true in every case. So I think it's best to take them as a baseline. Like if you are investing in an experience, take this into account. Sorry. Will they make you multiply or make your experience tenfold as good? Maybe not. But you're just like I don't know, rounding it up. It's like lifting the baseline, if that makes sense.
Understand? Yeah.
So yeah, these are the factors, the critical parts, and the moderators are things that you should take into account to let you know how much more effective it can be. So first one is socioeconomics, and I think it makes sense. And the examples that we were talking sort of illustrate that. When we're talking about the people don't buy the product, but the membership or the that for better or for worse, people on higher socioeconomic level value that much more than people on the lower rungs. Which again makes me think about education, like how you, in a way, education sort of makes you a more sophisticated consumer, for better or for worse.
I'm sure that there's a curve, right? I'm sure that the education makes you much better conservator up to a point, then there's a marginal gain, and then I think that there can be a backlash, because then sometimes it can be, I don't know. I think you can be affected by thinking too much. But anyway, there you go.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
With most things, and that's just decision making. That's not necessarily like you're going to make poor necessarily health decisions, but then decision making, and then you get into socioeconomics and right, about who can afford what and whatnot. Where does hedonism?
Exactly. Yeah, hedonism. And it made me think a lot. And it's the experiential advantage work best for people whose personality tends towards hedonism. And I think that was kind of a good thing for me to realize, because I guess I do consider myself a hedonist. Like I like enjoyable things. I like the pleasures of life. But I think, and I assume that everyone does, and I assume that the higher the pleasure for everyone, the better each person is going to feel. And that may not be how a lot of people operate. Like,
I was going to say, like, there's an awful lot of people in the world who austerity is,
exactly,
their highest value, right? And conservatism, and many. I mean, I guess for me, the opposite of hedonism is conservatism, right? Where rather than, because I think of the hedon as the hippie, right? As the person who's kind of out there, hey, like, I love nature, I love all these things, like, and of course I'm being extreme here, but then the opposite of that person would be someone who's like, we want a very controlled environment, we want to be able to maintain, image is really important, those kinds of things.
Yeah, or people, I think there's more people around the world than I thought that are fine living with simple things and not wanting.
Oh, I see. Oh, okay. That's another good way to think.
Not wanting things to be more luxurious every time, not expecting to have a better quality of life over time. They are content as they are. And I guess
I would think that would be a great add-on to the study. I would love to see a meta-analysis or a study on that, whereas we tend to have at least we're taught or we're told in the Western society, of always looking to level it up, to go to the next great thing. Like, how are you going to make the next experience better, rather than talking about fulfillment and contentedness, right?
And I know there is a big debate on that when it relates to climate change, for example. But I think that's one of the most difficult parts of the whole discussion, because there is a side that says curbing climate change is a matter of reducing our way of living, and for some people it's unacceptable. And I have to admit, for me, it's not easy to come to terms with that. I'm still like looking for alternatives. Like, no, that cannot be. We should be able to figure out climate change without sacrificing.
Sure.
And so that's interesting. And the final one, persuasion knowledge in the marketplace, a meta-analysis from 2021. And I think this is, very interesting as well, and very related to education, because this is all around something they term as persuasion knowledge. So basically is
people who are knowledgeable about the techniques that people use to persuade them.
Yeah, like your awareness of persuasion, its techniques, its methods, and so on. So does this awareness work to make you less persuadable?
And what's the answer? I'm very interested in the answer, because I consider myself one of those who has a high acumen in persuasion. So let me see.
Well, definitely there is what they call a coping response with persuasion knowledge. It means that, yes, if you are knowledgeable about persuasion, you will be less likely to be persuaded. However, if we somehow can put an index on persuasion, like you are 100% persuaded. Yeah, it's hard for me to wrap it up in an example, but let's say there's 100% of persuasion. If you have persuasion knowledge, if you're knowledgeable, in general, this will make the persuasion not 0, but 50. So that's what it says here. Empirically, persuasion knowledge only explains up to 50% of persuasion power. So it means that there is a lot of room, or there's good enough room for you to still be persuaded, despite knowing that you are being persuaded.
But I mean, we always characterize persuasion in with a negative connotation, right? With a negative tone, right? Whereas, I don't know, this is one of my spiels that you've heard many times, Christian, where it's, we're all salespeople all the time, right? Like, I'm a huge believer in, oh no, now the author's name is just Dan. To Sell is Human. What is his name? You can look up the book.
To Sell is Human.
The book's name is To Sell is Human. And he just, the only reason I mentioned that one book is because he makes the case so eloquently. But, we are persuading and selling. Persuasion is just another name.
Daniel Pink, of course.
Dan Pink. Yeah, thank you. Sorry. Persuasion is just a euphemism, a nice way of saying, look, you're going to sell somebody something, right? You're persuading them to make a decision, to basically solve a problem. But there's still, we're doing that in everyday life. When we meet a new person we're persuading them to become our friend. When we are, working with our children, we are persuading them to make certain behavior changes or certain behavior choices. Maybe when we are, internally inside a company, we have to persuade up and down. We have to manage up and we have to manage down with our peers and whatnot. And all of those require persuasive technique of some kind or another, right? Whether you realize you're using them or not. So it's interesting to me how we always now manipulating, that's a different thought, right? That's a different thing where you actually have a nefarious intent, right? Where you actually have, you're actively trying to move a situation or a person in a way where, to an end, to get to a particular end that really is self-serving. That would be
but
persuasion itself. I don't think it necessarily has to be a bad thing. So I can understand why that last bullet point there, where it's most effective, when you're unfamiliar with something, right? When you meet someone new, or you're introduced to a new product or a new service, or those kinds of things. For me, I'm immediately skeptical when I see new things, especially new things that have highfalutin claims. That's always like the biggest red flag. Like, really, that's interesting. Let's tell me more.
Yeah, and
education is definitely persuasion. And answer your question.
Yeah, but can you? I think there can be a fine line. Like, there could be places where the line between persuasion and manipulation is not so clear cut, and that could happen in education as well. There could be such a thing as
you just have to ask yourself, what's the unacceptable agenda, right? I mean, if we were to go down the rabbit hole of the religious experience, belief systems. I mean, we have extraordinarily persuasive and powerful mechanisms in belief systems, and are those bad? That's your call. You're gonna have to make a call. But when you have billions of people who follow that particular path, then is it persuasive, or is it manipulative, or is it acceptable?
Yeah. And well, I guess what you say holds true, or it's compatible with what they say. Well, persuasion knowledge makes you more skeptical. It's kind of obvious, I guess. Not entirely. So the persuasion knowledge only explains up to 50% of the persuasion power. But I guess, as you've said before, if the persuasion power comes with like arguments and clear explanation of benefits, then no matter how skeptical you are, it's funny because if you're skeptical, you evaluate the facts. So whether they're telling you in a persuasive way or not, if it makes you understand the benefits, then it doesn't make you less persuadable. But that's, I guess, I don't know, the value is there, so you should feel okay. Although what I understand is that this persuasion knowledge can be not always explicit, despite the skepticism and so on. So if the persuasion helps you understand benefits, it would not affect how much you know about how persuasion works. And interestingly enough, and I think you said it also, is that persuasion knowledge is more effective when you are completely unfamiliar with whatever people are trying to persuade you into.
100%. Yeah. Anybody who's had any kind of cross-cultural experience, should be able to understand that when you find yourself in a very strange place or in a very strange land, and then suddenly people are asking you to drink something or eat something or do these kinds of things. Man, there's even if you are like person of the world and ready to try everything, you're still at like that first reaction is always like, what's this gonna, what is this all about?
Well, yeah, remind me, because when I was traveling across Asia, one of the rules of thumb is you go to the place where there's more people. You go to the place where there's a line. You don't go to the place that may look amazing, but nobody's sitting there.
That's an interesting. That's a new one for me. I mean, at least when the experience in Thailand, people do line up. That is for sure.
Yeah.
Well,
so that would be the three meta-analysis.
That was awesome. That was fantastic. I love that. Super cool.
Well, hope people.
What's the next series of meta-analysis going to be about?
You tell me.
All right.
Well, you were mentioning there was like something that was worth researching, looking into.
I do not remember now.
You were saying when we were talking about the hedonism.
Was I just talking about? I mean, I was just seeing whether or not the hippie versus the conservative. I got that was what I was talking about. I don't know if there'd be something there, but we would love to hear. But that's a great way to remind our people who are listening to us and the people out there like Jason Melton. We'd love to hear your ideas. Like, what would you like to talk about here in office hours? That is pretty sweet. Oh gosh, I really wish I could pronounce your name. Igerim, maybe?
Igerim.
Senbezki. Bekidzi. That is super cool. Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. And we would love to hear from you. What else would you like to talk about here on office hours? Mostly we like to stay in the education space because, we are an online learning company, or we are a provider of online learning services. But, Chris and I are pretty adept, if we do say so ourselves, at threading the needle, making the tie back to education.
Yeah.
What we want to talk about here.
I was talking with this guy, Christian, actually, from the company, and he would make the case. E-learning is a very young field. So a lot of people who are at my age or older, they probably come from somewhere else. So it makes perfect sense that we talk about this and that and the other.
Yeah, we talked about, who were we talking with? Is it on one of the podcasts where I, just kind of, one of the things I loved about my past life was interviewing people and always finding out, kind of how they stumbled into this field of helping others, right? But we find that in e-learning as well. Like, how did you stumble your way into education or teaching and training or whatever it may be, being an instructional designer, those kinds of things. But I think more and more that if we did a meta-analysis, we probably found that that's how most people end up in their careers in general. Like a metallurgist. I know exactly 0 people who in high school was like, what I want to be? I want to be a metallurgist. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to figure out how to extract copper from the ground. But lo and behold, some people gravitate there probably through, the chemical sciences and whatnot, and you just find your way there. I want to remind everybody, I guess we're going to we'll tie it in a knot there, but we're going to remind everybody that I always do it wrong. This is happening, the eLearn Success Series. We've already had our design session, but you can still, you could still get access to it if you wanted to buy an all access pass. All of those 8 presentations were absolutely fantastic. We've got a ton of great feedback. And, you know,
should probably update this one, but
we'll have to update this. But our instructor session is happening on May 4th. So in 2 months here, we're going to have our instructor session. And this is going to focus on how, as instructors, as a professor, as a K through 12 teacher, as a trainer in a
This is the eLearn podcast episode.
Sorry.
No worries. You know, as one of those individuals who's passionate about, you know, being that facilitator or being that conduit of knowledge, how do you do it better? And what I'm excited about is, like, I'm teeing up a session, not a session, but yeah, a session where we're not just going to talk about, hey, how do I look better on a camera? But we want to talk about things like mental health and, you know, psychosocial support and inclusiveness. I'm pretty sure we're going to have Jess Corinne from Learn Fully. She hasn't committed yet, so I'm not going to call her out, but
okay.
She was a super dynamic speaker on the hot seat. I think, you know what, 2 or 3 months ago, talking about neurodiversity and how we think about that and how that, you know, how we can approach that as educators as well. So really, you know, super interesting day on May 4th. Ooh, wait, but Aldrim has a question. In higher ed, should we train all instructors to be able to design their content, or should it be done solely by instructional designers? At the end of the day, I mean, I've got an answer. What do you think, Chris?
Well, in the ideal world, whether the same person or a different person is the best at that. And there is a difference between being a great instructor and a great designer.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's the same person, then yes. If not, if we have great at each and the resources to work with both, then by all means. But I do say, I mean, I guess coincidentally, most of the best designers have instructional experience, because they see themselves, when they create, they see themselves working to humans or talking to humans.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, speaking of virtuous cycles.
Well, and I think you're saying the same thing that I want to say as well. I use the analogy of the great race car driver, or the, you know, immaculate musician, or something like that, you know, somebody who's a true virtuoso in what they do. And this is sort of the extreme example where that person, she may be, you know, the virtuoso violinist, and she probably knows a lot about building violins, right? She probably knows a lot about string construction and, you know, what kind of resonance, those kinds, but she doesn't do all of those things, right? Her job and her virtuosity comes from the performance. And so that's just a really extreme example of saying, you know, some people just are really great at that facilitation, at, you know, connecting with the students, at you know, understanding what piece of knowledge or what kernel of knowledge needs to be kind of taken and how the path should go. But then the instructional designer, their forte is probably, you know, how do we put this together in a way that actually achieves an objective, or learning objective, or learning outcome? How do we assess for it, right? So how do we create those assessments so that we'll be testing that knowledge to make sure that the outcomes are certainly achieved? And really what you find is if you have the resources, you know, and this is usually where the crux of the problem is in many higher education institutions is, if you have the resources, then, you know, designing education as a team sport can be really not only effective, but it can be efficient. And then you also, you know, you get those comparative advantages where what we find is if we don't, what we find is if it's poorly resourced, or it's resourced ineffectively. For instance, if you have an instructional design team at a large university that churn out things, or not able to keep up with the demand of those kinds of things, then you see instructors get disillusioned with it, or you see instructors get annoyed, or, you know, they don't send stuff there because, oh, it takes too long. So that was a really long way of saying, if you're good at it, why not, right? Like, I mean, I'm pretty good at riding bikes, and hey, you know, I'll fix a little dent, or I'll tweak things, or I'll tighten my brakes. But if I need a tune-up and I need to, you know, really get my bike back in shape, then I'm going to take it to a shop where there's an expert who knows how to do that without even thinking about it, right? Like, I'd rather pay the $100 to get the tune-up and have it done efficiently and done well, rather than having to try to figure it out myself. So
yeah,
in today's fast-moving interweb, you know, technology-based education space,
and I would say, to your point, people should be doing what they enjoy the most, or, well, maybe not, but
your happy space. If it makes
where
you
they
smile,
excel. Yeah.
if you're happy with it, yeah, that doesn't say maybe you don't enjoy it, but maybe
Like you don't want an instructor teaching if he doesn't, they don't want to, and so on.
Sure. Thank you so much for that question. That was fantastic. Great way to end our session today. Next week we will be office hours on Wednesday, which is what day? I don't know. It's the 7 days from now, 6 days from now.
16.
And we'll also have a hot seat next Thursday as well. So I will see you on the other side, Chris.
Bye. Bye, everyone.